Hello. So today is Veterans Day. It's actually a really funny coincidence that we are recording this on Veterans Day because our main topic is going to be about veterans. Now, I am Eris, and this is.
Juliana.
And we are recording this podcast for a school project. And really, our main focus of our discussion today um, is centralized around one question, and that is to what extent does the glorification of war in the media affect our perception of soldiers and veterans?
Yeah, so growing up, we always hear about Veterans Day, and we know automatically, oh, it gets us a day off from school. We don't have to go to school. And we kind of always looked forward to it. But personally, in high school or elementary school, I never had a day prior to Veterans Day explaining or expressing anything about Veterans Day. We'd never really understood why we had off. We just, oh, free day, I'll take it, you know?
Yeah, my school was the exact same way. I actually remember in high school, I had one teacher, and he was a veteran. He served for quite a while, and then he became a teacher. And we did not have Veterans Day off this one year. We actually had to come to school. I think it was a Monday? Yeah. And he ended up not coming to class as like an act of protest. And everyone else in my class was like, oh, yay, we don't have freshman science today. But I was like, wait a second. I feel like we should have today off. Or like at least acknowledge anything about veterans, you know?
Yeah, that's crazy because like you also think about like these are the kids that are actively playing like video games that are based around stuff in war and that kind of topic itself. So you think, "Oh, I'd have some idea of what's going on." That's crazy.
Yeah. Um, and you know what? You mentioned video games a little bit, and I feel like I kind of want to talk about our generation's like almost like desensitization to
Yeah.
gore and violence, like especially like from the stuff that we see in the news, movies, video games. Um, I feel like that can be kind of problematic in some ways.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, media now are advertising all of their advertisements towards like the younger generation with gory and war-based, video games. Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, Halo. They're all based on first-person shooter, and those are mainly the video games that are out there. I mean, I was on the phone with my brother last night, and he's like, "I just copped the Modern Warfare game. We playing?" And I'm like, "Good for you," you know. But
Mm-hmm.
it's stuff like that that makes these teenagers so excited. They're like, "Oh, I have to get the new Modern Warfare game. I have to get the new Call of Duty." Like,
I know. I feel like in movies also, a lot of people kind of praise the like special effects or CGI or cinematography that goes into making like the gore and violence like so realistic. And then like people love to see like someone's like limbs flying off, but like I feel like in an actual battle, in an actual war, it's like that is someone's actual life being lost, you know? It's not just like some random person in a video game. Like,
yeah, I mean, I know this movie that I'm about to mention has nothing to do with war, but I feel like Midsummer
oh,
had a really good job of taking what happens in cult-based societies
mm-hmm.
and having a really strong effect on like the environment it betrayed itself to. I personally have to watch Midsummer now in increments without being overly traumatized. Like I don't know how to explain it, but it takes a lot for me to watch Midsummer now because it messed me up a lot mentally. But I feel now with war movies, it takes a lot to get to that point. I've never been in a cult and I've never been in war, but at the same time, I feel like we've just become so accustomed to watching war movies and being, oh, that arm flying off from that bomb looks really cool,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yep. Um, I definitely agree with you on the like extreme violence being portrayed in these war movies. But like on the flip side, I feel like these representations of war and like war movies specifically, like they can be helpful, they can be useful, as long as like we're not over glorifying this like gruesome event. Like in class, like I feel like a bunch of people have like watched Saving Private Ryan or like other war movies in history classes, and I feel like to some extent it can be helpful to like help a student like connect what they're learning in history to like actual like visuals and like auditory representations to like get a feel for like, oh, what is it like in like a soldier's shoes in this battle. But also like these representations and like this violence can be really harmful to young individuals.
Yeah, and especially since these young individuals are the people that they're advertising them towards. They want that younger audience. They want those kids to critique everything that they've done because they're the baseline of media at this time. Like, you go on Instagram, the base of Instagram is majorly Gen Z.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to advertise to Gen Z and make everything that they like so they give you a good review, and then other Gen Zers will be like, oh, this person said this about this. I have to agree because we're the same generation. We have the same thoughts.
Yeah. I feel like there's definitely like a certain dynamic. It's kind of like hopping onto like the bandwagon of like this type of like violent media. I want to bring up the movie Dunkirk. I know we talked about this. Harry Styles in it specifically, and like I will admit, I love Harry Styles.
Same.
Yeah, I'm a huge stan. I paid a lot of money to go see him at MSG.
Same.
But you know, even I can admit, like that casting, Harry in Dunkirk, it. I don't think he really belongs in like a serious, gory film like that. You know, like this guy is he's a singer, he's a performer. He used to be in One Direction. I feel like he has like a certain following of like young women, and I feel like that really detracts from like what the movie's actually supposed to be portraying.
Yeah, well, it adds to that very much Gen Z is very one-minded type of thing. If we have those that are open to hearing others' opinions, but have no influence on how they express their opinions. And then there's those that see their point of view and don't want to see or hear the other side. So if we have celebrities that are used to advertise certain products and we like those celebrities, we're going to buy those products and we're probably going to watch those movies that have those celebrities in it. But say we don't like that celebrity, like I bet you a big following of, I don't know, adult men probably didn't want to see Dunkirk because they didn't appreciate Harry Styles as an artist.
Yep. Yeah, that really goes back to like you have a pretty decent film, like a war representation, and then you have it being like, I guess like tainted by a celebrity playing a major role in the film. And like you said, it could either attract a huge group of like 12-year-old girls to be like, "Oh, I want to go see Harry Styles in Dunkirk." Or like it could kind of detract like or repel a huge amount of like actual people who are interested in watching this movie or like have like a special connection to like that event or that battle or like being a veteran.
Yeah, and I mean, Dunkirk isn't the most gory of the war movies out there, but I still feel like it kind of deters the true meaning behind the story.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have these 12-year-old girls that are going to see Harry Styles in Dunkirk, they're going to be like, oh, I saw Harry Styles. And you're like, well, you don't understand what the purpose of the movie was supposed to portray. Like, we're not here for Harry Styles. I'm here to see what happened.
Mhm.
Like, I wasn't there at that moment.
Mhm.
I don't understand war.
Um, Going along with this idea of like these war movies, I also wanted to mention these war movies. I feel like they focus on very specific themes or like even stereotypes in these movies. Like it's almost always like the stoic, heroic soldier and like, you know, like super patriotic and like, oh, like they're so dedicated and like also like this theme of like hyper masculinity and like almost like toxic at some points. I mean, like in these war movies, I feel like we almost always just see this like hyper masculine male character, you know, like super macho, super serious and stern and whatnot. And I'm just thinking, like, in the shoes of like any other veteran who doesn't match this like one specific like identity, I feel like that can be really difficult to watch, you know, just like knowing that like your veterans as a whole are being represented as this one idea when really like that's not representative of veterans at all.
Yeah, I mean, also for a time where people really had to hide who they were as people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know now it was a big struggle for LGBTQ to be allowed in the Army or the Marines or literally any branch.
Mm-hmm.
But if you ask any Gen Y, not even like the millennials, like, no, that's not millennials. Gen X is millennials. But Gen Y, like my parents,
Yeah.
especially my dad, they'll be like, do you notice how there's a big influx of gay people all of a sudden? And I'll be like, well, Dad, there's always been
Yeah.
those like LGBTQ members. It's just
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't openly accepted at the time, so they had to hide who they were.
Yes.
So if you're showing this one side of the military, it kind of makes that community feel like, oh, I don't fit into that. Maybe war or the army isn't for me. Maybe serving my country doesn't fit my description.
Mm-hmm.
So it leads to a bias in some way, shape, or form, regardless.
Yeah. I also feel like in these war movies, like it's almost like a trope at this point where it's like the stories are like essentially the same. You know, it's like different battles, different people, different parts of the world, but like it's like the same white guy in battle, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and going back to like the idea of like the violence and gore in a lot of these movies, I feel like sometimes it can be like really exaggerated just because like the exaggeration of like violence and gore like that just gets more views. I mean, I have a quote from this like survey study that surveyed a bunch of veterans and like this one 57-year-old combat veteran said the media in general is focused on selling newspapers airtime, social media space, not reporting the facts and realities surrounding armed conflict. I just feel like that is so eye-opening and like so powerful. Like it's true. It's like even myself, like I'm a consumer, I'm a viewer. Like I can admit like I click on those Instagram ads sometimes. It's like these things are tailored in the media to like make us want to view them, make us want to click on them. And I feel like from like a veteran standpoint, that's really sad to know that like your trauma, your experiences are like almost being exploited by Hollywood essentially.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I feel like it was kind of almost refreshing, but also a little disappointing to watch South Pacific in class. Because it's like, it showed that kind of opposite side to war and how there is a bit of everyone in it. And it was a musical,
Mm-hmm.
so it also then portrayed to that other area of persona. So, but then at the same time, it's these men wanting women and women complaining about how they don't have men,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of desensitized the whole point of war. There was like no fighting at all. It briefly showed that clip of that guy dying. So it's like, how accurate is this actually making war seem? It's not that accurate.
You're so right. You're so right. Honestly, like I might even argue there's like very little accuracy in these war films. I feel like war films as a genre, like I feel they're usually paired with like romance or like suspense or thriller or like sometimes even comedy. Like even though comedy's pretty messed up, but they're very much less like documentary like, less truth based, less fact based, and I feel like they're more so based like, oh, they take a certain story, take an event, take a battle or war, and they kind of almost like make things up along the way just because like it attracts more attention. You know, it's like these events are being exaggerated sometimes. Like they focus on the gore, the heroic acts, the like bonding between the soldiers, like there's always that like survivor escape story being portrayed. And I feel like that glorifies war in a lot of ways because it omits like actual truthful events and experiences from real veterans and real people. And it just focuses on like the events and stories that just grab people's attention.
Yeah, I mean, I want to know how often, or if they did at all, ask like veterans how to make a movie based off this stuff. Like, I want to know how many resources they use to just make it as accurate as possible. Because I don't know if during Dunkirk they had some veterans sitting there saying, "Oh, that never happened."
Yeah.
You know? D-Day. I wasn't there. Majority of us nowadays were not alive at all. So how accurate are these movies getting at this point?
Yep.
We don't know.
Don't. And honestly, like I can only imagine like actually having a connection to one of these battles, like or like being a veteran yourself, or like, you know, your parents or grandparents served in that certain battle or certain war, and to like think to yourself while you're watching this film, wow, like I don't think that happened. That doesn't seem realistic, you know, and I feel like it's just insulting and disrespectful to like these veterans who could have lost their lives, could have sacrificed a lot, given a lot, to have their like stories be told in this like really glorified way when war itself is really, it's ugly, it's gruesome. Like these are real people's lives being lost, people getting actually traumatized, and it's just very much exploitative. It's really sad to see this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, now all of a sudden throughout social media, whatever, you hear a lot of support the veterans, support these fallen soldiers. There's a lot of people that are going to different tombs of the unknown soldier and like recording the change of soldiers or whatever. But it's like, how often can we talk about these fallen soldiers without exploiting them?
Yes, you're right. And I feel like today especially, like I feel like you and I are gonna leave this studio and like look on Instagram and see everybody posting on their stories. Oh, like remember our veterans, like oh, thank you for your service. Like just like a random picture with like random words on it on their stories. And like there's just like a certain level of like performative activism, I feel like, when it comes to Veterans Day and like other events like this, where it's like people like to, I feel like people feel good about themselves when they post like, oh, thank you for your service. But like then after posting that, they make no effort to make any actual change. You know, it's like I have a certain number, and there are in 2022 there were 33,136 homeless veterans in the U.S. Like that is a huge number. I mean, like we collectively are just not doing enough. Like there are not enough institutions or like groups in place to like help veterans like reintegrate back into society, into the workplace. And like this is This is why we have this like homeless crisis. Um, it's really sad that like we have people who actually served, dedicated years, even decades of their life to service, and then we fail them as soon as they come back home.
Yeah, I mean, my older brother has two friends that are going into some branch. One of them is going to be a Coast Guard, and the other, I believe, is going to be a Marine.
Mm.
But every time they come back from wherever they're stationed for a weekend or whatnot, they'll like complain. They're like, I want to know where all of our money is going. Because if people are making fundraisers or they're dedicating their lives to, I don't know, us
Mm-hmm.
as military, like I want to know where that money's going. Because the one that's in the Coast Guard
Mm-hmm.
was talking about his uniform, and they have to buy literally everything. That sword that you see them walking around with, they have to pay for that sword. They're not just
God.
handed it. Like, and to me, I feel like that doesn't make sense. Because if you want people to acknowledge that you're serving your country, why don't you make it free?
Yep.
Like, that bothered me a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know why.
Yeah, it's really sad. Like this treatment of like veterans, especially recently. Um, I mean, I feel like half the time I'm like driving around, like I feel like half of like the homeless people you see like holding a sign. I feel like half of those signs say that it's like, "Oh, I'm a veteran," and that is so sad. You know, it's just like on like a human level that like we can let these people down like that. I mean,
Yeah.
they served for us. They fought for our safety, for our well-being, and so much more. And then the second they come home, it's like we forget about them. It's like we forget about all the service and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I feel like they're only there for us to exploit.
Mm-hmm.
This person served in the army. Our army is the best, strongest in the world or whatever, and we just want to prove it's practically a big game of whose thing is bigger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I hate to say that, but it is. We a couple years ago we had that nuclear thing going on
Yep.
with like Kim Jong Un. Like, why are we saying, "Oh, I can nuke you in a second," and him saying, "But I could do it back," and you're like, "But we have more." Like,
Yep.
who cares?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's what our army's here for at this point. They're not getting paid as much as they should. They're putting their lives on the line to get paid minimum wage. Like, that's messed up.
Yep.
You can't exploit them and then not give them anything for it.
Yes.
They're doing exactly what you want them to do, and you're just throwing them to the wind. That's not fair.
There was actually a couple years ago I watched this documentary. I think in school, and the documentary was about veterans who had come back after serving, and they had like injuries, like hip problems, back problems, like chronic pain. Not to even mention the PTSD. Like they had like really bad physical ailments, and like they were promised, they were promised surgery, promised medication, promised all this like health care, and they were receiving none of it. So like, how can we blame like these veterans for ending up homeless, for ending up without even just roofs over their head when they get injured, they come back and they receive like little to no health care. It's really disappointing. You know, it's again like you ask the question like where is all the money going? It's like it should be going here, but it's not.
Yeah, and you can't expect then these people to then recommend, oh, yeah, no, join the army, like it's worth it, do it, you're serving your country. You make it very difficult at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Because these people are like, all right, so then what do I get out of it? And you just respond with nothing. You get nothing out of it. And you're like, so then why would I join? There's no purpose to that at all.
Yep.
So then you have now like these younger generations that are not going to want to join the army because they see it one way in film or in books
Yep.
or on the media, and you're like, oh, this isn't that bad. Like, you have no idea how many times I've been scrolling on my For You page on TikToks, and it's just people in the army or military just like hanging out,
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, so it's not that bad. But then you're like, but I'm only seeing this one side of it. I don't know the other side because they're too busy glorifying it and showing, oh, no, join the army. This is what happens.
Yes. In these movies, especially, like you have like young viewers seeing like this violence and like the gore, um, excuse me, and like the almost like heroic side of war, and I feel like it misleads viewers into thinking that like war is like this great thing where it's like, oh, like an opportunity for glory and all this stuff when it's not. You know, like war is awful. It is probably, like, in my opinion, like one of the saddest acts of like humanity just in general. And then you have these individuals who think all war is violence and getting to do whatever you want and just having the power to destroy and to kill. And then they end up wanting to join the military, and then they get there, and half of them find themselves seated in front of like a computer, and the other half like actually get deployed. And yeah, I mean, I knew a lot of people from my high school who ended up going into the military for what I thought were the wrong reasons. Like these were not very patriotic people. They were more like they just wanted to mess around and have fun, you know?
See, but that's the issue. If you think joining the army or military of some sort is for fun, that's when you're wrong because they clearly did not understand the point of, Saving Private Ryan or
Yeah.
Dunkirk because it was over glorified.
Mm-hmm.
We had Tom Hanks in Saving Private Ryan. We're like, oh, we love Tom Hanks. He played Woody in Toy Story, like,
Yeah.
they're gonna. And I know on my DVR, not even, just on my cable,
Mm-hmm.
every time there's nothing to watch, Saving Private Ryan is always on. I don't know why, but on one of the channels, it just kind of plays on repeat.
Oh my god, like on loop. Wow.
Probably.
Oh god.
So it's always there to watch. So I feel like if we're watching it consistently, at what point does it not matter anymore? Where you're
Yeah.
like, oh, all right, this is like nothing. That guy's being blown up. Like, he's dead. His skull's bashed in. At what point do we just become so unbothered by it?
Yeah. And that also raises the question like who is at fault here? You know, it's like we were explaining like we have like the young individual who like goes into the military for the wrong reasons under the wrong impression, thinking that war is cool when it's absolutely not. Like at what point do we have to look at Hollywood? Do we have to look at these producers? Do we have to look at even ourselves, like society in general, for wanting to consume this like type of media, like in these war movies and these video games and all this stuff? It's like we almost can't help but be seeing like these movies like Saving Private Ryan. So it's like, is it our fault for like being exposed to these things, or is it the producer's fault or Hollywood's fault for creating these things? You know?
I feel like it also it tends to get lost, like, that it's all fake.
Mm-hmm.
We are watching these movies and people are dying and all this stuff is happening, but at the end of the day, they're all still alive.
Yeah.
It's all fake.
Mm-hmm.
It's all for that movie. At the end of the day, that building didn't actually get blown up.
Mm-hmm.
It's fake.
Yeah.
So I feel like we feel like there's no actual true harm in it because then we'll see Tom Hanks at that Saving Private Ryan premiere. We'll see him walking the red carpet with no bruises, no scratches. He's alive. It's all fake. And we kind of take that we don't take it into consideration at all.
I feel like another huge fault in these like war movies is also like they tend to focus on just like a certain battle or just a certain war or just like the intense parts. And they almost never really show like the aftermath of war. You know, it shows like the riveting, exhilarating, like overwhelming part of it, but not what happens after. Like, you know, what happens to these people's families? What happens to these people who lost limbs, who are like severely injured, who are gonna suffer from like chronic pain or anything else after, or like even PTSD? Like, we almost never see any signs of like PTSD or just mental health discussion in general in these movies. And like I feel like that's partly because of the time they're trying to portray, but like PTSD like very much existed and obviously still exists within this community. And it's really sad that like veterans are not getting the representation that they might need. You know, it's like we focus on the hero, not really like what happens to the hero after war.
Yeah, and I've noticed a lot recently that our school system has only taught us one side of the story from the American point of view. And again, I'm going on TikTok and I'm seeing all these Europeans or people from Asia just going, but do you know that this happened here? And I'm like, I was never told that situation was happening over there. I didn't know that, like I don't even have an example, but we're taught such a limited amount because we want America to be portrayed as the hero.
Yes.
We don't, and we don't want to not think that Hitler was anything other than the enemy. And I'm not sitting here saying, oh, you know, glorify Hitler or anything, but at the same time, what was going on over in Germany?
Yes.
But we don't hear much of that because we're just too busy being the patriot, you know, and I put that in air quotes because, you know, you have this generation that's like, America this, America that. But at the same time, how much do you know about foreign history?
Yeah.
You can't say that we're sitting here being the heroes when we got involved in a war that we had nothing to do with.
Yep.
The only reason we got included was because someone bombed Pearl Harbor, you know?
Yeah. And in classrooms especially, I mean, like, we really focus on the idea that like history is written by the victors, you know, and it's strange how like in almost every scenario, like in media, like America is painted as the victor, as the hero. You know, it's like, oh, sacrifice this, we did this, we're so great, like we're liberators. But like from other countries' perspectives, like were we really, you know, like we like to think that for our pride, for the sake of like our patriotism and nationalism, but like at what point do we as Americans have to sit down and be like, can we set aside this idea of like Americanism and focus on humanity as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with our last response paper in class, how much of, you know, history did you learn in high school to got to a point where you knew that we put Japanese people in kind of concentration camps. I mean, there weren't concentration camps, but internment camps.
Internment, yeah.
How often do you hear about that?
Never.
Not a lot. So it's like they say that Americans are like known as the liberators of the concentration camps, but we practically did almost the same thing to people.
Yes.
After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, we just decided, oh, all Japanese people are not okay. They all did this to us. Some of them were born in America,
Yes.
but no, we're just going to completely ignore that side of the story.
Yeah.
I mean, and that tends to happen a lot in history. After 9/11, America kind of just turned their back on any Muslim, Islam, literally any Middle Eastern country.
Yeah.
Because we're like, oh, they all did this to us.
Yep.
Based off of looks.
Yeah.
and but they're like, no, but the Americans did this one insignificant thing.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you care?
And you know what? Even going further back than those examples, like, I don't know about you, but like, I had one teacher in high school who like really emphasized teaching about, well, arguably like the genocide of indigenous people, Native Americans in American history. You know, like, America always focuses on us being the heroes or the victors, but like, on our own land, like, by our own hands, we committed essentially like a mass genocide of Native Americans. I mean, like, their culture was like essentially wiped out. I mean, like, the younger generations were being put into like schools. They were being forced to like adopt Christianity when that was absolutely not their religion. And it's like, we are so quick to judge other countries. Like, we were quick to like liberate the Jews in concentration camps in Germany, but like on our own soil, like in our own past, like we had done essentially the same thing.
Yeah, and it's like crazy how every once in a while you'll see on the news like more indigenous children being excavated from weird burial plots under schools.
Yes.
Like how can you judge someone for something they did when you do the same thing? Like, how rarely do you hear about that Nazi stuff that happened at Madison Square Garden?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
We literally had Nazis come and speak to people at Madison Square Garden.
Yep.
And no one will ever talk about that because they're like, no, because we liberated those concentration camps. We saved the Jews.
Yep.
When they were doing and talking about the same thing over here.
Yeah.
It's just being a hypocrite.
Really, yeah. And I feel like that almost makes me like wonder, like, what is being an American? What is being patriotic? I mean, like, everybody clearly has their own definition. They live by their own different truth. But it's like, when do we set this idea of like, we are the best, we're the victors, we're liberators, we are like the land of the free? When do we set that aside? And when do we consider maybe we were in the wrong too? Maybe we made mistakes too, you know, like.
Well, because now you have all these people that are like talking about how you should support America no matter what you do, because if you don't, then how patriotic are you? Then just leave the country. That's everyone's new favorite saying. Then leave.
Yep.
Why don't you leave? You don't know the full story. Yep. And that's why I feel like earlier when I mentioned that people are very one-sided and they don't want to hear anyone else's opinions because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to think that this country may not be the best thing possible for them. The only people I feel are very dedicated to the United States are straight white men.
Yeah.
And I love saying that to people because I'm not wrong. They get the most privilege.
Yes, they do. And they love to deny it.
They love denying it.
Yeah.
Like, I could sit here as a woman and be talking about how I don't get as much privilege as a straight white man, and then you'll have them telling me that I'm wrong.
Yep.
Like, you can't tell me I'm wrong. You make more money than I do on a day-to-day basis on the same job.
Yep.
How is that remotely fair in any way, shape, or form? But it's because they're being dedicated to.
I feel like that idea also makes me wonder, like, to what extent are like the institutions and systems that we have in place in America, to what extent do they serve like an exclusive group? That mainly being like the typical like wealthy white straight male. You know, like even going back to like our discussion about veterans, it's like a lot of our institutions and systems clearly are not going into helping them receive healthcare, aid, therapy, anything like that. You know, it's like to to what extent are our institutions failing the majority of Americans?
Yeah, I mean, and it also took a very long time for the army and the military and whatever to accept women into
Yeah.
joining and enlisting. And even now, if you're a man and you register to vote, you're automatically registered for the draft.
Mm.
Women still don't have to do it, and not that I'm complaining.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it took a lot for us to at least get the option to join and enlist.
Mm-hmm.
But we're still being downplayed. If a woman came up to me and said that they were in the army, I'm like, good for you. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
could never. I'd have the same reaction if it was a man.
Yeah.
But then you have the men going, oh, you can't do it. Like, you're a woman. You're weak. You know, you're not as strong as a man.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where that hypermasculinity comes in.
Yes. Wow. Full circle.
Full circle.
Oh my. um, all right. I think we might start wrapping it up there. I mean, today's Veterans Day. I just want to say, if you are a veteran and you are listening or watching or whatever, tuning in, I just want to say thank you for your service. I also want to give a collective apology to America's behavior as a whole. I mean, we talked about how our treatment of veterans, especially on this day, is sometimes performative, sometimes not really coming from like a true place of like genuine gratefulness or concern or appreciation. So yeah, I hope that this little episode got you thinking about some things, maybe reflecting.
Yeah, I agree, and I also apologize.
Okay, yeah. Again, this is Eris,
And Juliana?
and it was so nice speaking. Thank you.